Another week, another Sunday, and another round of the League of MVP as we take another stride forward in Season 7. Tonight we take to France, and Paul Ricard is the circuit that hosts the 6th round of what has so far proven to be a mightily competitive season of racing action. And while we visit a circuit that might not be everyone's favourite in the real world, it's not been the provider of the best of racing action. It's one that can very much still give some promise. When you take it to the virtual world, the virtual French Grand Prix still has a lot of potential with heavy braking zones, long straights, and a lot of opportunity to find a way through in the best of times as the drivers negotiate the very fast and windy circuit of Le Castellet. My name is Zach Sweeney. I'll be your commentator for today as always. Well, as always, starting from last week, of course, for round number 5 at the Hungaroring. And I'll be talking you through all of the racing action here today. Speaking of the Hungaroring, as we take a look onto the circuit, the previous race results are as follows. You can see Burmeister was able to take the victory, now ahead of George in second place, and he's going to be looking to advance his way forward, of course, as the season progresses. But a very late lunge in terms of George's efforts after a very late safety car was able to at least have a sniff of potential victory. Snoopy Dread rounds off the top 3 of the podium for Aston Martin, with championship leader of AJ Mando in 4th. Mike then comes home in P5. George, or I should say Lazy but Talented in P6, Dino, Royal, David and Avecii your top 10, with the fastest lap going the way of the McLaren. 1 extra point to his name after a very late run on softs to see them all the way to, well, the end of the race. Unfortunately, was not quite able to be the position at the end of the race that they would have wanted because, well, unfortunately, a bit of contact didn't quite go their way. Speaking of championship leaders, though, in the form of AJ Mando, we're going to take a look at the driver standings after 5 rounds of action. 1 sprint round as well in the mix. AJ Mando comes into this race leading. Unfortunately, not able to join us, though, but holds a 10-point lead ahead of Snoopy Dread. Avecii rounds off the top 3. David DePay, though, only 5 points behind there in 4th. Mitch rounds off the top 5. Lazy but Talented Burmeister up now to 7th in the championship after a 2nd place and a victory last time out at the Hungaroring. And you can read through the rest of the results there as follows. And now, let's not forget, it's not just about the drivers, it's about the teams as well. The Constructors' Championship are as follows. It is Aston Martin that now lead the way ahead of their competitors of Ferrari by a singular point. 132 go the way of the British Racing Green outfit ahead of the team from Maranello, the very historic team of Ferrari. 131 versus 132 as we progress ourselves in towards the second half of the season. Mercedes round off the top 3 in a very, very close fight for 3rd between themselves, McLaren, AlphaTauri, Red Bull, in all separated by just over 20 points between the 4 of them. Alpine a little bit far behind, matched of course on points with Williams. Alfa Romeo just 4 points behind that, with Haas only on a lowly 3. Unfortunately for them, not been the best of starts to their season, but still a lot of potential to work their way forwards. And now we jump ourselves into qualifying. Following a couple of minor issues in the previous renditions of the stream, we tried to get ourselves underway, but a couple of technical issues on my part meant that we had to unfortunately restart it a couple of times. But we're into the lobby now and all should be good. If you are watching along at home, make sure you like, subscribe, turn the bell on for notifications, and get yourself into the YouTube chat as well. I promise I do not bite at all. And, well, we can certainly look forward to the 6th round of season number 7 here for the League of MVP. And as you can see on track, looking fairly overcast, it must be said, in terms of how it's looking on circuit. Starting to rain just a little bit, so it might well be the case that the tyres and the laps that they have now been able to get themselves sorted onto now could be the final laps that we see done. David DePay, as it stands, on pole position, a 130.832 from the youngster. Only about a 10.5 clear of Snoopy Dread in 2nd place. Then comes Lazy but Talented, George in 4th. Then comes Royal, Cammy, Avecii, Chicken Skin, Mike, Smidge, Zvamp, Process and Unbeaten, all to round off the field. still with just over half of the session left to go. I mean, still ample opportunity if people are willing to try and improve. We'll ride on board with second place man of Snoopy, who's unfortunately invalidated his lap, so maybe we won't. We'll maybe take a look on board with the Mercedes of Lazy but Talented, working their way through turn 2, 3, and then to round off sector 1 into the very fast but also very tight turn number 4. Through the right, then the left, trying to hug the inside as much as possible. Then a very quick chuck to the right and really struggling for grip out there, but still managing to improve just a little bit to the first sector. Flat out through turn 7 that sees you now down the Mulsanne straight for the only time on your lap. Actually, no, for the first of 2 times on this lap. You have a bit of a detour through the chicane, looking for the 100 braking board and down to 5th gear, trying to keep the revs as low as possible, build up the traction slowly, gain that confidence and get your foot to the floor as quickly as possible. The Mercedes then through sector number 2, losing quite a lot of time through the very short sector, so I don't think we're really going to see much in terms of improvements from these guys over the next few minutes, so we'll probably just have to watch some cars go around, if that. Maybe we won't even see anyone taking to the circuit in an attempt to save their tyres. But still a lot of, a very tight and competitive field, it must be said. I mean, you've got David, who coming into this race for McLaren, I mean, at the end of the Hungarian Grand Prix, David was looking fairly strong off that safety car, but unfortunately not quite going his way in terms of the actual race result itself, because for one reason or another, I think maybe got caught up in a bit of contact that sent them spinning. But looking to bounce back, of course, was very much quick was David, but wasn't able, as I say, to convert that into the result that he would have been hoping for. Snoopy as well up there in 3rd place at the end of round number 5, so still a lot to maybe have a look at for the Aston Martin to move forward. And of course we look to a couple of people who maybe could make some inroads forward. We haven't actually got our reigning race winner here for us today. Burmeister not taking to the field, and also not taking to the field is Mitch, who's very much disappointed me in the last couple of weeks. He's drafted me in for commentary, got me in, done all the negotiations, dotted the T's and crossed the I's, and wait, no, that's the other way around. Cross the T's and dotted the I's. That's the one I'm looking for. There we go. Get my sayings correct at the end of it. But it got me in and sorted everything out, and now he's not even shown up for the races and completely snaked me out, with Mitch. So if there's anyone to throw abuse at, not that you should throw any abuse at anyone, but it is definitely Mitch. Go harass him just a little bit. Go say, "Oh, Mitch, what you doing, mate?" But regardless, I'll shut up about the endeavours that I've got with Mitch and the little vendetta I've got against him, because I really don't. He's a very, very nice guy, and well, him and a number of other people in various other leagues gave me the opportunity to now be in a position where the thing I love doing, which is sitting here waffling on about pretend race cars, is now sort of turned into some form of a career for me. However that's turned out, I do not know, but it's because part thanks to Mitch that I was able to do that. So he's a very nice guy and was able to give me that opportunity. Thankfully, the guys at home haven't, thought I've been, you guys don't think I'm doing too bad. So, to each their own, I suppose. You don't think I'm bad at what I do. You enjoy watching the stream, so I guess that it's thanks to you guys too that I'm able to do what I want to do and do something I very much enjoy. And onwards and upwards, really, from here, looking into 2023, already looking very, very busy in terms of commentary. I mean, just yesterday, 9.5 hours spent in the commentary booth over the entire day. 4 hours on, an hour off, 2 hours on, 2 hours off, and then 3 more hours on all the way to the end, plus the pre-show for about 20 minutes. So, yeah, very, very busy. Very, very busy bee. Unfortunately, with the rain mid-qualifying session, DRS is now disabled and no one able to find any avenues through. So, well, qualifying drawing itself to a close very early on. So we'll talk you through the grid order as it stands. David DePay then takes pole position with his one-lap shootout for a 1:30.832. Snoopy Jed for Aston Martin will join him on the front row of the field, looking to stretch their advantage at the top of the constructors' table. The 2 Mercedes of Lazy But Talented, and also George 3 and 4 for a second row lockout, with the Red Bull of Roy rounding off the top 5. Behind that, though, comes Cammy, Avecii, Chicken Skin, Mike, and Smidge, your top 10, with Svamp, Process, and Unbeaten, the rest of the field. Race going to rain, according to the Alfa Romeo meteorologists back at the factory, of course, in Italy for Alfa Romeo, and well, hopefully their forecast is looking fairly correct. I mean, it does look a little bit wet and moist on the circuit of Paul Ricard, but well, should be a pretty entertaining race nonetheless. 27 laps, of course, around the French Grand Prix circuit of Le Castellet, and well, should be a very, very interesting race indeed. For the next 3 minutes, though, I think I'm going to step aside, give you something to sort of digest. I'm just going to take a breather, then by the time we get ready to go racing, we'll go through the grid order as for one more time for those of you that are only just joining us. So go get yourself a cup of tea, go get yourself some popcorn, get whatever you need before we indulge into the League of MVP Season 7, round number 6 here for the French Grand Prix. Welcome back then, of course, to the League of MVP. I do hope you've stuck around. I mean, I was only gone for a couple of minutes just to take a breather and have a bit of a drink. I've remembered this week there is no formation lap for this. I mean, I haven't got any food with me, so I'm not going to be taking a lunch throughout the race anyway. But just as a little side note, that we're all good. I'm not going to miss the race start this time. Bye, guys. Don't you worry. It is the Flying Dutchman, though, with David DePay for McLaren that takes pole position after a very interesting short qualifying session here for the French Grand Prix. The Frenchman, home ground, of course, for Snoopy and the Aston Martin, looking to make some inroads on the championship, both in the constructors and the drivers, will join David on the front row. Then comes Lazy But Talented and the other Mercedes of George, the second row. Roy rounds off the top 5. Cammy in 6th, round off in row 3. Avecii P7, Chicken Skin P8, Mike and Smidge the 5th row in the top 10. Svamp 8, Process and Unbeaten all at the back of the field. 11th, 12th and 13th respectfully for the bottom 3. We are just moments away from getting ourselves underway here in France for round number 6 of season number 7 of the League of MVP. As I said at the start, my name is Zach Sweeney. I'm the commentator talking you through all of the racing action here today, and I'm sure it's going to be in absolute buckets full. That, however, does not look like rain. So not only have the Alfa Romeo meteorologists got their tyre choices wrong, they've also potentially got the weather forecast wrong as well. Could we see some dynamic changes as the race progresses? That is another thing entirely. But as it stands, it looks to be clear skies and sunshine for at least the initial opening moments of the French Grand Prix. We look forward to getting ourselves underway once again for another bit of racing action. 27 laps, of course, 50% race, and a lot to be decided for in the championship. As you can see, just 26 seconds away. Now ticking down, of course, all the way to the 5 red lights to signal us away for our action here today. I really do hope you are enjoying. If you're watching along at home, make sure to like, subscribe, turn the bell on for notifications to not miss anything that comes out of League of MVP. Make sure to engage in the YouTube chat as well if you are very much interested in starting a bit of conversation. But the 5 red lights soon to illuminate your screen. Here we go then. A McLaren Aston Martin front row, 4 lights, 5 red lights for the French Grand Prix. We're underway, foot to the floor, and here we go. A fantastic start from Snoopy Dread, already trying to pull alongside the Flying Dutchman of David Depay, who gets a very good second phase. Side by side, just in behind with Royal, already trying to make up 2 places off the initial start. Inside line for turn number 1 as they run their way through. David leads from Snoopy. Royal now up to 3rd, and a bit of a slide there from George, and of course Lady as well. Now side by side with Avecchi as they run their way in towards turn number 4. Outside line for the Aston Martin. Forced off the circuit though on those hard compound tyres. It seems a bit of a split strategy for a number of people trying actually to make the most of the initial dry point, trying to stretch these tyres all the way to some potential rain later on in this Grand Prix. We'll have a quick look as to the biggest gainers and losers of the initial starts. Of course, you can see there, Lazy but Talented down 1, George down 2, Cammy down 2. Side by side in the background there, you can see between Unbeaten, Mike, Svamp, Process and Smidge all trying to funnel their way through also. And now as they exit Sector 1 and into Sector 2 and rounding off Sector 2 as well into Sector 3, David leads from Snoopy, Royal, Lazy but Talented and Avecchi, the top 5. And well, certainly cannot wait to see how this race progresses forwards. I mean, in terms of how it's looking weather-wise, I don't really know how to call it in all honesty, as we see Svamp trying to move his way as far up the field as possible in the Oracle Red Bull Racing machine, and David already stretching his legs out in front. Now 1 second clear as we round off the first lap of 27 here in Paul Ricard. A 140.2 is the first lap, and of course as the race progresses that time is going to come down, but we were talking about a split strategy choice as I get the buttons completely wrong. But in terms of the tyre compounds, we've got David on the mediums, Snoopy on hards, mediums, mediums, hards, hards, mediums, mediums, hard, medium, mediums, hards, medium. So a very, very split strategy in terms of people looking at maybe potential changes in the weather. That is again the biggest cause of this sort of discrepancy, is the fact that some people are confident maybe the mediums will take them to the rain, others not so much, and maybe the hards are the way to go in terms of minimizing your time in the pit lane. But again, it's a case of suspended in uncertainty, and we don't actually know as to how things are going to transpire until things actually do. A bit of a train all the way behind Snoopy as Royal tries to make some inroads, but I'd imagine we're not going to see much of that until we do get to lap number 3. Of course, DRS to be enabled on that lap, and when you go down the Mulsanne straight through the DRS detection zone, the first of 2, before then at the start of lap 4, you'll get the run through the pit straight. Lazy but Talented also on the back of Royal. So he himself trying to make up for what has been a fairly lackluster start, dropping down 1 place versus the Red Bull, able to get the jump over both Mercedes. Rounding off lap number 2, then on to 3, and it seems that we have got a bit of a train starting to form as David Depay, 134.343, sets the benchmark then for everyone to try and chase after. DRS enabled now as we head away onto the 3rd go around of the I said about mid-length in terms of lap length over the course of the Canada, longer than the likes of the Red Bull Ring, but not quite as long as the likes of Spa or Singapore. Lazy but talented, already a 3-second time penalty due to multiple track limits incursions, and that's very, very easily done around a circuit like Paul Ricard, but putting the pressure on now Royal, and maybe with the slipstream we could see the Mercedes have a bit of a run. Now on board with the Mercedes and DRS open, but for the pair of them, in fact, side by side as we run our way in towards the chicane for the first part of the Mulsanne straight. Outside line as late as he can on the brakes, saws his way around the outside and back up the inside for part number 2, emerging wheel to wheel are the two, and Lazy but Talented might be able to promote himself onto the podium, indeed does so. But in doing so, is losing a little bit of time to Snoopy side by side just in behind as George tries to make up some places on the other Aston Martin of Avecii. In towards turn number 11 though, nothing really happening unfortunately for George as he tries perilously to find a way through, but no avenue just as of yet. Chicken Skin just in behind these guys as well for the Williams in the number 7 machine, I believe that is just in behind. But doing his best to make some inroads, and the number 2 machine, I should say, of Chicken Skin now maybe a look into the final corner, but again, nothing really happening there. Back up to the front, and Lazy but Talented with the DRS once more down the pit straight, looking to go for 2 cars in the same lap, but that's going to have to go for 2 cars in 2 laps, maybe at the same point if he can angle himself at the right trajectory for the maneuver. We'll have to wait and see as to how that one goes about through the right and then of course the left. And well, Lazy but Talented is coming off the back of not the best of races. I think it was around about P5 or P6 in the Hungaroring. Definitely a top 10, so not the worst of results, but just having a quick look, yeah, P6 for Lazy but Talented, looking to improve upon that and really, you know, re-embark on some good results. Not quite close enough for the move there as George we see in the background up to 5th place versus Avecii, and now ahead up inside the top 5 on the hard compound tyres. A bit of a 4-car train forming. As also just up in front there, you can see Lazy but Talented looking to the outside of turn number 10, trying to get the up and under though. Goes the Mercedes defensive, goes Snoopy trying perilously to hang on to 2nd place, and all the way around the outside of turn 11 is not surely going to work. Has to tuck back in, of course, but meanwhile all this is allowing is the Flying Dutchman of David to fly away out in front. So Lazy but Talented needs to get a way through and try and make some inroads on the McLaren, or he risks being left in the dust. Already picking up a penalty. Now side by side, outside line in towards the final corner. Maybe going to try and go the long way round. Emerges still side by side. Gets the drive off the corner as well with the wider arc. And the DRS up now into 2nd place. Goes Lazy but Talented. Snoopy Dread left, unfortunately, with his pants round his ankles and dropping now down to 3rd place, but is on the hard compound tyres. Could we see a resurgence late on in this race from Snoopy? Chicken Skin, the number 2 Williams machine, still knocking at the door of a top 5, but excuse me, what seems to be a 7-year-old. I don't quite think that is going to be the case, but yeah, I do doubt that. There are some young people in this league, but I don't actually quite count that to be real, as we see Cami and Avecii now running side by side. The Haas trying to move forward in the championship in terms of the constructors, and current championship leaders in the constructors is Avecii and of course Snoopy, leading away just by a single point ahead of Ferrari, who have got no attendees today, so it's going to be even more of a stretch no matter what the point score is for them. A bit of a train as well forming behind Svamp, who himself is on some medium tyres, so getting caught out. And just in behind there, Mike and Smidge running side by side as we cut back to that side by side through turn number 12. Not quite the trajectory that we thought could have happened for Unbeaten Sign, who's making their way forward from last on the field, now looking to maybe send a move to the outside of the final corner. Again, not quite close enough on this occasion. Riding on board, and we'll have the slipstream and DRS process already retired from the session. Side by side now down the pit straight as Unbeaten Sign moves his way up to P number 1, but not P number 1, P number double 1, P11 for Unbeaten Sign. And again, trying to get the up and under, get the drive off of turn number 2 in towards turn 3, but it's just a case of not quite enough in the right points. Doesn't want to deploy too much of his ERS deployment, his battery at all. So trying to be conservative. Victoria, come on Snoopy, you have no choice but winning the French Grand Prix. And well, on the hards in terms of their pace as well, shouldn't be, could definitely still have a good shout. There goes your nan, Bread's girlfriend. Again, very strange name for George to pick, but to each their own. Getting past Royal and up now into 4th to try and start the resurgence for Mercedes, but yeah, it's about 6 laps now behind progress, behind schedule for Mercedes in their bid to move forwards. Looking to close the gap to Snoopy. 1.5 seconds is the gap as we join lap number 6, and we try and turn our attention up and down the field really as best we possibly can, as Avecii is closing the gap to Cammy bit by bit. The gap only 0.6 of a second. A little bit behind that, the fight for last place rages on. Mike in the Alfa Romeo trying to make the move as long way around now and towards the penultimate corner. Turns into the inside as the Alpine, the long way around, nearly going into the side of each other, nearly so close to contact, but still emerging side by side once more. A bit of wheel-to-wheel banging almost, and now still emerging side by side as Mike gets the run with the DRS to stay in front and hang on to P11. No points, of course, so more so fighting over the wooden spoon than anything in the initial opening moments of this Grand Prix, but still a long way to go, and maybe some potential forecasts to come with it. Avecii, a 3-second time penalty for multiple warnings, becomes the second driver to be awarded said disciplinary, but nothing major in terms of David or any championship protagonists as of yet. But of course, still suboptimal as we look just in front. You can see Snoopy and Lazy side by side between the Mercedes and the Aston Martin, squeezed off or almost onto the exit of the chicane at the end of the back straight. And now you can see George is into the mix as well, side by side as they run towards the very fast right-hander. Snoopy on the inside, so trying to get the up and under goes Lazy. He gets the move done, and now inside line for the very, very long sweeping turn 11. Has he been able to get the move done? The Aston Martin's got a long way round to go as they emerge. Here's Lazy but Talented, managed to get the move done, and now George is on the scene, looks to the inside of turn number 12, late on the brakes, so close to contact, and Snoopy tries to go all the way around the outside off the circuit now for the Aston Martin, who just about hangs on in the balance. They're still going to try and go side by side, equal tyres for the pair of the cars, but it is going to be the Mercedes that reigns, and now second and third for Lazy but Talented and George. Great bit of teamwork between the pair of them, and now they can set their progress forward. Maybe we could see George make some progress up into second place, and be very, very consistent from George if he could actually finish second place for another race in a row. But Snoopy's bid at home Grand Prix only falling backwards from second place on the grid. Well, a great initial launch, it must be said, for Snoopy, but again, it's I don't know, just not quite getting up to speed as much. And guys, if I do stay quiet for more than sort of 10-15 seconds at a time, do tell me in the YouTube chat, because I'd much rather you tell me and tell me off that I need to unmute myself, as opposed to me commentating absolutely nothing from your perspective. Close between the two Mercedes just in front, as Lazy but Talented tries to defend. David Depay running away with things up in front as it stands, 6 seconds clear of the rest of the field. And now to the left-hand side of shot, the right-hand side of circuit. There goes George up in a second place. Maybe the hards already coming into their own. Is there going to be a fight back from Lazy but Talented? Nothing on this occasion. So George, after a poor start, falling from 4th to 6th, up now into 2nd. And trying to make as many inroads as possible. Maybe close the gap to David. Maybe on the better strategy. That remains to be seen. But the hards very quickly coming back into their own in terms of pace, as they sort of look to, as the mediums degrade at a much faster rate than the hards, there'll be a crossing point where the hards are actually at some point quicker than the mediums due to the slower degradation of the harder compounder rubber. And if that's already happening on lap number 9, well, I don't really know what to say. That seems that the mediums are tearing themselves to shreds, but the gap between David and George will be one we monitor as we turn our attention a little bit further back. The fight between Smidge, Vamp, unbeaten for P number 9. As a spin, actually, there's Chicken Skin, the Williams, having an off. through the end of the first sector, overtaken and out of the top 10 now. Fighting to try and get back into it immediately, maybe with some DRS assistance, and down the Mulsanne straight for yet another time, trying to recover off a spin, but the best way to do it is already being on the offensive, now past unbeaten sign, and well, turning a pretty dire situation back into some points, and really got to settle back into things, really got to push back forward, recollect yourself, and get back onto the offensive, but once more out of ERS energy deployment. So Unbeaten might actually eye up a bit of a counter-attack. We'll turn our attention once more back to the front, because very, very close still in this three-way fight for second. George versus Lazy versus Snoopy, and a third of the way through this Grand Prix already, and I don't really know as to where it's going. I mean, I guess I've not been around long enough to really make any educated assumptions as to who's going to be where and how they're going to be doing, but smidge into the pit lane is what I can tell you already on those mediums. Whether that's a planned pit stop or not, again, remains to be seen. But yeah, I mean, as it stands, you'd say that David is looking good to win the race, but George's pace on those hards is, second to none in terms of those on the hard compound tyres. So I would expect George to bounce back in the second half of this race. Based on George's pace and how he's demonstrated himself consistency-wise, yes, of course, not getting off to the best of starts initially, but again, that recomposure, that mentality switch back into race mode saw George get themselves back from 6th to 2nd in the span of only a few laps. So, I mean, definitely don't count out George, and as the roles reverse, as David goes onto the hards and George steps up onto the mediums, maybe that gap could close. Any safety cars, penalties, rain as well is another variable to take into account. And again, I guess that's the joy of motorsport are those variables, the countless amount of variables that come into play when it comes to motor racing. I mean, you think lap after lap, there are so many different things that can go wrong with a race, as Vamp actually goes off the circuit through turn 11 and 12. Allowing Chicken Skin and Unbeaten to close the gap to 8th. But, right now, I mean, Unbeaten's wheel could disconnect, say. As into the pit lane actually comes the majority of the medium runners. Lazy but Talented in, Camions, Vampin, Chicken Skin all into the pit lane, and changing onto the hard compound tyres releases the likes of George and Snoopy to sort of be on their own to lead the fight. David's still out there though, same with Royal on those 10-lap-old medium compound tyres, so really stretching long, and as Gailey says, David is on another planet indeed. Got pole position by a 10th and a half, not looked back since the start of the race. But yeah, I mean, Snoopy's wheel could switch off right now. Their game could crash. The rain could come at any point. Their tyre degradation, their mistakes, braking a little bit too late, the ERS management, the consistency, all those tiny little factors add up into one combobulation of a motor race. And, there's so many different things that go into it that it's really not easy to predict at all. And I guess that is one of the joyous things of sim racing. I mean, just yesterday on the Virtual Endurance Championship for the 12 Hours of Daytona, with about three-ish hours left to go, all three class leaders, the Daytona prototypes, the LMP2s and the GTEs, all three's race leader had some sort of issue at some point, all in the same 30 seconds. I mean, you had Race Clutch and Colin Spork, who crashed actually into the leader in GTE of Adam Baldwin and Juices Motorsport Club's Ferrari. And then, of course, you had the leader in LMP2, the Pescalaro esports car, who just got themselves a drive-through penalty out of nowhere, all in the span of 30 seconds. That is how quick things can change. Just the blink of an eye, a snap of your fingers, things can go drastically wrong, drastically quickly. Funnily enough, it was those same three leaders that did actually end up winning the race in of itself. But again, that's besides the point. It shows that principle that you are never safe. You can never be complacent. So David, doing a fantastic job. 6.5 seconds clear as we see Royal now onto the hard compound tyres, presumably to the end of this race. Coming out just behind Cami for P9. But let's not forget there are still 6 other drivers yet to pit, and 5 of them are on the hards and going extra long into this race. But David, 6.5 seconds clear. on another planet in terms of pace in the opening moments, but the more he stays out, the fresher his hard compound tires are going to be, which is certainly going to help him, but the more worn his current medium tires are also going to start to be, which is going to allow George to maintain or even chip back away at the gap of David. As it stands, it's maintaining at around 6.5 seconds and even actually now closing in. So we'll ride on board with David to see what he does in terms of strategy. And into the pit lane on lap number 12, releases George to take the lead of the race. Approaching the halfway mark already of the French Grand Prix is the race leader and pole sitter of the Flying Dutchman, the McLaren, into the pit lane, onto the hard compound tyres, and it's going to be crucial to get them back up to temperature. George, now his job is to make the most of those hard compound tyres. Whatever little life they've got left, he needs to use. So 1.5 seconds back to Snoopy and the Aston Martin, of course, as they've been maintaining the gap quite well, actually. So, again, could go either way. Snoopy here, home soil, home crowd, and, well, you might be saying, yes, it's the virtual sense. He's not actually got any home fans cheering him on, apart from Victoria, of course. As unbeaten sign, a 3-second time penalty for multiple warnings, becomes the 4th driver to be awarded said penalty. But, I mean, you've still got that same home atmosphere. It's your home circuit. I mean, for me, I always tend to do better at Silverstone or Snetterton or Donington, any British circuit, because I've got that home feel, particularly, I guess, at Snetterton, because it's, only a 40-minute drive away from me. But any British circuit, I feel that I tend to take a love to because of, I guess, the democracy or democracy. What's the word I'm looking for? Patriotism. That's the word. Of my country, and your home circuit, you take those, that fondness to it. So Snoopy Dread, yes, he's not got the real French people around him, screaming at him saying, win the. I'm not going to try and replicate a French chant. I'm sure anyone else could do that for me. I did take French for GCSE, but I'm not confident enough to do it. But again, besides the point, they're not really like shouting at him and chanting him along. You can't hear that atmosphere, but he's still at his home circuit. You just step up to that level. I know I've been waffling on for the last minute trying to talk about it, but the underlying point is you step up to the occasion. It's your home race. It's the one race that means the most to you. And at different points in the season, as Mike from Alfa Romeo into the pit lane as well from the hard compound tyres, the first of the initial runners to do so, onto the mediums to the end of the race is Mike, and trying to cause a resurgence back to the front. But there are always meaningful races for you on the calendar. I mean, there's races that you want to do well at, and typically that's the initial opening round of the season, because you get your season going and into a swing of things. You start the season on the right foot and use that as a stepping stone. Then of course you got your home race, which is like, yeah, cool, home race, I'm pumped, home track, I should know this one better than any. I mean, of course, there are other people that don't really like their home circuit that much, and that's fair enough. But as an overarching majority, the census is that you do well at your home circuit, and then whatever your favourite circuit's at, you make sure you do well at that circuit. And then, of course, the season finale. You want to end the season on a high, because if you don't, you've got the entire off season with that in the back of your mind, thinking, "Oh my word." Like, I've ended the season on a bad one, and you go into the next season carrying that same burden if you've not been able to reset. So very much have to be careful and keep an eye out really for falling into that trap. But we are approaching sort of the halfway mark of the season as it stands. Of course, we are at the French Grand Prix, round number 6 of this season, and well, looking forwards, we've still got a long way to go. All the way seeing us through to the end of March. We go to Monaco in a week's time on the 19th. Then to the Netherlands, a sprint round for the Austrian Grand Prix. So these 2 races take place there. Then, of course, to Shanghai, Saudi Arabia for the penultimate round, and Abu Dhabi at Yas Marina to round us off for a brilliant calendar of racing action. And, well, so far, so good, and looking onwards and upwards. As it stands, nothing really happening on circuit, but take it with a pinch of salt. I mean, granted, yes, it doesn't look like much right now, because people are spread out and really not, at the the top of their game, and I guess not as close as they would like to be to the people around them. But you have to think the fight really is between David DePay, George, and Snoopy, who are now 1 and 2 in the race. As soon as they come into the pit lane, they're going to switch on to the mediums. Now, they've been on the hards since the start of this race. They've been on the hards, they've had the heavy fuel loads, but as they've been burning through the hards, they've been burning through their fuel. They've got a lighter car, they'll have fresher rubber, and they'll have a short sprint to the end. David DePay might actually not be as secure in this race as we thought. Avecii now for Aston Martin into the pit lane, marking potentially the end of the hard run-in stint. Also, the Alpine have unbeaten in as well. But George and Snoopy extend the stint just one more lap. The race is on versus David. And what we thought was a very secure 6.5 second gap, you might find might not be the case come the next 12 laps of racing action here at Paul Ricard. I do think it is going to be quite close. I think it might well be really, really close. But again, that remains to be seen. Maybe David has just put in a sensational run of form. As Jan Toquin, very French of you to put in the triple baguette. That is the slogan, I think, of the French Grand Prix, is just baguette, baguette, baguette. But Royal, the closest battle on circuit as it stands between Avecii, hards versus mediums. Very cold mediums, it must be said. So maybe this is Royal's chance to strike with the DRS, potentially trying to get the power down, but not quite able to. Is that a baguette? It is a baguette. I'm not being blind. I thought you were laughing at me for a second, Gailey. I was like, hang about. No, this is not right. I'm not having this slander. But no, you're just laughing at the baguette. I mean, very, very on brand. It is La France, or is it La France? I think it's La France. That's my A in GCSE French, or I got a 7, but I think it transfers to an A. Your Nan Bread's girlfriend, George, into the pit lane now for the first and only time in this race, onto the medium compound tyres, and stopped stationary for quite some time, as actually it was just a glitch in the system. Snoopy Dread then takes the lead of the race, and Gailey corrected my French, La France. Oui. What else do I know in French? I don't actually know. I used to be able to talk about the fact that I wanted to be a commentator, and I earned loads of money from doing it, but I can't do that now, probably. I mean, je voudrais être la commentator. There we go. I think something like that. My accent's all over the place as well. I'm sure I'm going to get slandered for that. I think that means I would like to be a commentator. I don't know. Pour la Grand Prix. There we go. That one too. It's not as bad as someone in my class, though, who as soon as they said anything that wasn't French, they just went completely British. They was like, what were they saying? They said, it was a case of, it was something about Manchester United, and they were like, my favourite team, they were like, j'aime jouer la foot avec mes amis, and they were like, my favorite team is my favorite team is Manchester United, and they said j'adore. They said this in a full French accent. They were like j'adore, and then just said Cristiano Ronaldo in the most British voice you could ever imagine. And I always just take the mick out of her for it, because it was just really funny. But us Brits, we cannot at all nail any foreign accents. And I'm trying to learn German on my Duolingo now, and I'm hopeless at it. Us Brits, just anything foreign is scary. And Gailey is very much right in the sense that the Aston Martin is into the pit lane. David DePay takes the lead of the race as George is trying to hunt them down, of course, and gets ahead on the undercut on the mediums by a fair some margin as well. Vive la France, of course. Or is it La France? Ooh, correction, controversy maybe. Unbeaten sign, fastest lap, of course, for BWT Alpine F1. 1:33.1 for them, but now into the final stage of this race. The race is on. David DePay versus George, 7.1 seconds. 5 lap old hards, 1 lap old mediums to the end of this race. Lazy but Talented is a few seconds back, and of course with the 3-second time penalty along with that. So as it stands, will fall behind Snoopy in the running order, but Snoopy as well trying to chase after the podium. Cammy only 2 seconds behind that. After the pit stops, the split in terms of strategy. very much deciding some points of this race. I mean, we had a good 10 laps, the discrepancy between the mediums and the hards. Now sees the race liven back up again, and already 6/10 taken out of David in the opening sector, or a couple of sectors for George on his stint. So, I mean, is it a matter of if? Is it a matter of when? Are we going to see George catch up to David? And how much is David going to have in reserve to fight with? I mean, again, literally just going back to yesterday, because it's fresh in my mind, and I'm sure none of you were actually there watching the race live, but we had an issue in LMP2 where in DPI, right at the end of the race, the championship leaders of Simframe Esports they took fresh tyres at the most recent pit stop, and there was around about an hour and a bit left of the race, as opposed to Seawolf Net Race, their competitors in the Daytona prototype class, didn't. They took the track position, and if you don't know how it works in endurance racing, is their pit stops are a lot longer than Formula 1, right? They have to fuel up each stint, and it can take a good 20-30 seconds to fuel up, and then an extra 10-15 seconds, sometimes even 20 seconds, just to change all 4 tyres. So Seawolf Net Race decided to not take the tyres and be out there on very, very old tyres all the way to the end. And what actually happened was Simframe, the catching car, as a yellow in the first sector, that's for Svamp, unfortunately having a bit of a spin, closing off, going on to the Mulsanne straight at the exit of turn number 6. But what happened was the Simframe car on fresher tyres spent a good hour trying to chase down the second place car of Simframe. And over time, I mean, the gap was coming down tremendously, 20 seconds, then 5 minutes later, 18 seconds, 5 laps later than that, now 15, 14, 13, 12. It got to 10 seconds between the two, with around about half an hour left to go. But what had happened is the freshest tyres had ran out of steam on the chasing car, because they'd pushed them so hard lap after lap, so much so that the chasing car's initial incredible progress really started to slow down, which then stopped them from making that advancement. And I can see a similar situation here with David and George, whereby the McLaren, if he can just keep the pace decent enough to hold George at bay going into the final closing stages of this race, maybe George's tyres could give way and slow the progress down. It could go the way of either of them, as we see Austin Mandanak say, "Come on, George, anyone but Snoop and David." So very much a George fan in terms of the YouTube chats there, but 4.5 seconds is the gap. We focus our attention to this battle right here. Lazy but Talented versus Snoopy. The Frenchman pulls out to the left-hand side of the race circuit, right-hand side of shot, and catapults himself up onto the podium on some fresh medium tyres versus Lazy but Talented, and up now into P3. 6.3 seconds off the second place Manavecchi as well. 2 Aston Martins going for 2 moves in the span of the same corner on the same lap, and up now into the top 5. So Aston Martin really stretching their advantage in the Constructors' Championship. Cammy sent wide. Royal inherits P7, same too with Unbeaten Sign inheriting P3. So Snoopy, the home hero, with a lot of home supporters in the YouTube chat. I mean, I was talking about not feeling that home atmosphere, but they're certainly getting some support on the stream. Thank you, of course, to the 9 people watching along on the YouTube stream. Make sure to like, subscribe, turn the bell on for notifications. My name is Zach Sweeney. I'm your commentator, talking you through all of the action here today, and we are definitely getting bucketfuls of it. Into the final 7 laps now. We go through lap 21, 22, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. 7 laps left to go, and the gap is 4 seconds between our 2 race leaders. David DePay has been leading this race from start to finish. A fantastic start from pole position put them in this position. But now the fresher tyres, Snoopy gaining bit by bit by bit. And could it just be enough to pip the McLaren? Only time will tell, but time are definitely not on the side of George, who really needs to get a move on. And again, it's one thing to catch, it's another thing to pass, it's another thing to hang on to that position. So, I mean, again, anything could really happen. I mean, they could crash into each other and Snoopy could win the race, for goodness sake. I mean, anything could happen. You have to take everything with a pinch of salt, because nothing is set in stone when it comes to motorsport. 3-way fight here for P number 7. Royal trying to hold off the Haas and Alpine of Cammy and Smidge respectfully. And the number 8 machine trying his best to get the run, but again, nothing really materializing on this particular occasion. It's a shame we haven't got much in terms of side-by-side action and racing action, but from a strategical standpoint, from a predator versus prey situation, like we're seeing with the medium, well, now medium runners chasing after the now hard runners, it very much is a hunter versus the hunted. Gailey thinks David is going to win this race. I mean, that's definitely not a far-fetched assumption. As long as he can keep the pace good enough, I don't know. Another lap ticks by, and it's another 7/10 taking out of David. We're going to have to monitor the progress. I think it's going to be close. I mean, don't forget, as soon as he gets within 1 second, it's going to be a much easier sort of affair to close that gap. But George very consistent in terms of lap times. You know, only a 10th down through the first sector, despite pushing those tyres to the absolute limit all the way through. But I mean, it could go any way. Literally any way. Into the very tight and awkward right-hander before you swing yourself through the very, very long right-hander of turn number 6 into the flat-out left-hander of turn 7 and down the Mulsanne straight once more. The replica of the Le Mans straight, of course, as Cammy is closing the gap. Defensive goes Roy, and now to the right-hand side. It'll be the outside line for Cammy, and soars past with DRS versus Roy. Not even phased at all. It wasn't even like Royal was there. Up now into 7th place goes Cammy on some slightly older hard compound tyres, but now Royal under a bit of pressure from Smidge, and maybe it could be argued that the DRS strength was a little bit too strong in that sense, but we'll have to wait and see. I mean, of course, Roy not given the best situation in terms of energy recovery system. So, I mean, again, there's that, and allowed Cammy to soar past, but it would have been nice to see them at least try and go side by side it for just for a little bit. Back at the front though, one more lap ticks by, and it's only a few tenths of progress for George. I don't know, it's scary, it's nail-biting stuff, because I don't actually know how this is going to go. I'll be honest, I don't know. I've seen this exact situation time and time again, but it's been different outcomes each time. It's very circumstantial. There's no way to really put your finger on it and say this is what's going to happen, which I know you guys are relying on me to do, because I'm in the commentary booth. I'm meant to be able to give insight, analysis, experience, and make this entertaining, and I'm trying to do that, but the action speaks for itself. Is George going to catch? Because I'm just as suspended in this anticipation as you guys are at home, because I don't know. And he can see the McLaren. Well, right on board them actually as he goes through the very fast right-hander at the end of the back straight. He can see David, which surely tells me that he knows what he's catching for. We'll come back to that in just a second. Side by side as Smidge gets past Royal for P number 8, but Royal might be able to come back at him for the 8th position. 4 points going the way of whoever comes out on top of this fight, but I don't think Roy's quite got the strength to be able to go for the move. Also a fight here, Avecii versus Unbeaten Sign, both on the mediums, both with a penalty, so this is for position and to decide the top 5, but yeah, I don't know. Victoria saying something about yesterday we wrote in English. I don't know. Again, I'm very rusty on my French. I noticed English and the yesterday, and I don't know. I'm trying to get it. I'm trying to understand. Slowly but surely. But into the final few laps now, and 2.6 seconds is the gap out in front. But back to my point, I mean, George can see David. That's got to unlock something in George's mind, an instinct, that fire to say, I want to go and catch. The competition is there. And as a racing driver, you have to... as a racing driver, you're going to want to seek competition. We're very competitive people, sim racers, and real life racers as well. As soon as there's a challenge, as soon as there's something to race for, we go for it. So, I mean, George, if he can see it, if he's got the energy, the tyre life left to do it, he's surely going to try and put his best foot forward to do it. But 2.4 seconds is very much within penalty range. So, as much as it would suck to happen, David, if he gets a penalty, would lose the race. I mean, he's been mightily consistent, but 3 laps now left to go in the French Grand Prix. A fight for the final points paying position as well. Yesterday we were together and Jan said that he needs to learn how to write in English. I was close enough. Zach, what do you think of the AlphaTauri 2023? I like it. I think it's alright. It'll do. I mean, AlphaTauri's colour scheme in general is... It's a nice colour scheme. It works well. The navy blue with the white. Again, it depends on the angle you look at it, I think, for AlphaTauri. But overall, it's not the worst looking car we've seen. And hopefully the more important thing is the performance. I think AlphaTauri do need to make a step up from 2022 because P9 in the Constructors' Championship is, you know, from a multiple race winning team. Granted, those race wins were special circumstances back in 2008 with Sebastian Vettel and 2021 or 2020 I should say with Pierre Gasly. You know, you start to think as to where their performance lies. We'll come back to that in a sec because Avecii is looking to the outside of the Aston Martin in towards the chicane. Oh, scared off just a little bit, discouraged from the move. The AlphaTauri need to make a move forward, make their best stride forward and kick off 2023 really, really well. I mean, they've got a fairly strong driver lineup of Nick De Vries and Yuki Tsunoda. So, again, anything can happen. I hope that the Alpine will not be pink. Yeah, same. I mean, if they're going to be pink, go all pink, not the pink and blue. I don't really like that livery, and I shouldn't say that because I do actually know the livery designer, kind of, for Alpine F1. He goes to the local karting centre of mine with his son, and you know, he's a very nice guy. So yeah, I shouldn't be too harsh on Alpine, but you know, yeah, the pink doesn't really suit the blue. Which livery so far do I like the most? I mean, the Red Bull, as much as it is a cop out and very much a copy paste, it's a reliable livery. It looks good, and the car itself looks good. I think the 2023 and of course the 22 regulations allow for some really good looking cars. I mean, we've also seen the Alfa Romeo, which looks alright. Haas is meh. Haas is okay. Who else we've seen? Williams is a nice car as well. I do like the Williams, but as a livery, I mean, all other sort of variables like repeated liveries and boringness aside, the Red Bull is a very nice looking car. So I'd have to say that, but I can't wait to be disproven from the likes of Mercedes, Ferrari, McLaren as well might have a good shout, good livery coming their way. I do like their 2022 livery, of course. So we'll wait and see. I think there's still still half the grid left to go to decide in terms of livery. So we'll wait and see, and then make a decision. The Aston Martin as well yet to come out in terms of theirs. Alpine also. Yeah, still a good selection as we head on our way to the final lap of this race, and the gap 2.4 seconds. I don't think it's quite going to go the way of George that he would have liked to. It was a valiant effort, able to close 5 seconds, but just 2.4 seconds too short, and unbeaten, fighting with Avecii still over 5th place. We'll keep our eye on the race leader as to where he is relative to the circuit, but in the slipstream and of course the DRS for the Alpine. Is he close enough to go for a move? Avecii squeezing him all the way to the right hand side of the circuit, but outside line now for turn 1. Late on the brakes goes Avecii, side by side. The Aston Martin versus the Alpine, able to hang on to 5th place goes Avecii. Both of them equal tyres, equal penalties. This is for position, and now unbeaten sign. A good effort, but not quite good enough. The second attempt, the final attempt, it must be said. The run down the Mulsanne straight towards the chicane. Is he close enough? Is he close enough? He'll have the slipstream, he'll have the DRS. What is going to happen? DRS open, using what little overtake he might have left, closing and closing at an absolute rate of knots. Oh my word, moving late. Avecii discouraging and beaten sign. Bit of contact between the two of them. Outside line once more for the Alpine, who soars his way up in towards 5th place. Has he managed to make the job done? Yes, he has. And now the Alpine seals the deal in very sketchy fashion, it must be said. But we have to return our attention to our race leader, the dominant young Flying Dutchman from pole to flag. Only one more corner left to go, left to negotiate, and George put up a mighty fight. The pressure certainly was on. It wasn't as easy as the 25 machine made it look, but he's now got the run to the line. He sees the checkered flag first. David Depay makes up for his woes in Hungary by winning the French Grand Prix. 27 laps of action. George joins him on the podium in second place, with Snoopy Dread, the home hero, a home podium for the Aston Martin, and more points gained in the Constructors' Championship for Aston Martin. Snoopy rounds off the podium. Laser but Talented there in fourth, with Unbeaten Sign, a late move there all the way to P5. Avecii, a good joint points haul there for Aston Martin with, well, what is going to be 8 points and 15. So do the maths, 23 points gained in the Constructors' Championship. Then comes, of course, with penalties, Cammy takes 6th. So Avecii demoted to 7th. Royal, Chicken Skin, Smidge, Mike and Svamp yet to round off the field, with Process, our lone DNF of the session. But very, very close. I mean, Cammy was only a 10th off, actually, beating Unbeaten Sign on penalties. That was very much a race against time. So, very, very close indeed. But, yeah, not much in it at all in that fight for 5th, even though they were separated quite a bit on circuit, as Svamp becomes the final one to cross the line. We'll run our way through the grid order, then we'll just talk a little bit about the race, actually, and then round off things. Of course, that is all the racing action here today for the League of MVP. Unbeaten Sign takes the Driver of the Day award as well. I'd say so. I mean, it's a justifiable thing, but David and his prowess all throughout this race was, again, second to none. He proved that by winning. Waiting, of course, for the podium cutscene to load itself in. Then we'll be able to go through the results. After 27 laps of racing action here at the French Grand Prix, it wasn't the rain that was maybe forecasted for the race, as the Alfa Romeo meteorologist suggested it was an interesting dynamic in qualifying, but after all of it, it was our pole sitter. Lights to flag for David Depay. The Flying Dutchman takes victory. 2.1 seconds clear of George, who put a valiant effort in to try and close the gap right at the end of it. Home hero Snoopy, P3, with Lazy but Talented, the Irishman, 4th, making it a 2-4 for Mercedes. Unbeaten Sign rounds off the top 5 for Alpine in their home race. Cammy, P6, just in behind. Avecii, P7 for the Finn. The Norwegian of Roy just in behind, with Chicken Skin and Smidge, the fellow Irishman of Lazy but Talented, rounds off the top 10. Then comes Mike and Svamp, who takes the fastest lap but won't gain the extra point for it after not being in the top 10B. Process TV, the sole DNF of this race. Well, ladies and gents, I mean, what a race that was for the French Grand Prix. How fantastic it was to see such an event. I mean, granted, there wasn't a lot in terms of side-to-side action. I mean, that's fair enough, but we saw a different type of action. We saw a strategical race between two fantastic drivers right at the top end of talent in this championship, and I mean, it could have gone either way. All it was 2 seconds in as a margin for error. David Depay, mistakes over the race, a slight bit of pace, only a couple of tenths per lap would have seen the difference of 2 seconds. I mean, anything could happen. If George didn't get a worse start, what could have happened if George didn't get a bad start and fall back to P6? Again, it would have been a very different story, and the hunt was on. Unfortunately, just a little bit short for George, and well, maybe that might not be the first time that he's heard that, but at least it was the case here for the French Grand Prix. For 27 laps of racing action, well, I certainly cannot wait. In a week's time, of course, we take to the streets of Monte Carlo, the toughest race of the calendar. The walls are very, very close. I mean, it's a circuit that needs no introduction. It's a circuit that, well, speaks for itself. The longest race on the calendar, alongside Silverstone, Spa and Monza. One of the original 4 is Monaco, only missing 1 event, and that was because of COVID back in 2020. But yeah, I really cannot wait to see how people negotiate themselves around Monaco, because it really is going to be a race of attrition. People are going to have to go into it with a different mindset, more consistency, and well, we'll have to wait and see who comes out on top. In terms of the championship, We'll have to wait and see how that lines up as well. But a good step forward for Aston Martin. AJ Mando potentially losing the championship lead after all of the proceedings here today as well, after not turning up. So all is on. In a week's time, for the 19th of February, it will be myself, Zach Sweeney, in the commentary booth to talk you through the 39 laps of racing action around the streets of Monaco. This has been the League of MVP season number 7, round 6 for the French Grand Prix here at Paul Ricard Le Castellet. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk you through all of the action. Thank you for watching. It's been an absolute pleasure, as I say, to talk you through. Take care. We'll see you in a week's time, and bye-bye.